Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for our virtual open house for the Connecticut Active Transportation Plan. I'm Anna Berzon with the Connecticut Department of Transportation, and I'm joined today by our team at DOT and our partners at HDR. We are now in the final stages of developing this plan, and this meeting represents the last phase of our public outreach process. All meeting materials, updates, and future information about the plan will continue to be posted on the project website. So we're excited to share today's presentation with you. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to our partners at HDR to begin the presentation.
Thank you, Anna. We're just going to go over a couple of slides that just to send a few reminders to people. So Title VI, your civil rights. So no person shall, on the basis of race, color, or national origin, be excluded from participation or subject to discrimination in the development of this project. Voluntary post-meeting survey, if anybody wants to scan it and provide their feedback here, and then the civil rights information link. Also, a recording of this presentation will be posted to CTDOT's YouTube channel and the project website after the event, and there will be like a period for you to provide feedback. And then closed captioning, including non-English translation options, are available, excuse me, on Zoom and YouTube. Next. This is another one also. We can pause here for 1 minute. Just a reminder, the Connecticut Department of Transportation operates its programs and services without regard of race, color, national origin, in accordance with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. Any person who believes he or she has been aggrieved by an unlawful discriminatory practice under Title VI may file a complaint with the CTDOT. For more information on CTDOT Civil Rights Program and the procedures of title complaint, contact the CTDOT Title VI coordination at 860-594-2169. TRS 711. Deborah Goss at CTGOV, or visit our administrative office at 2800 Berlin Turnpike, Newington, Connecticut 06131. For more information, visit the CTGOV/DOT. A complaint may be filed directly with the Federal Transit Administration by filing a complaint with the FTA Office of Civil Rights. Attention, Title VI Program Coordination, East Building, fifth floor, Terrace, 1200 New Jersey Avenue, Washington, D.C. 20590. A complainant may file a complaint directly with the Federal Highway Administration by filing a complaint with the FHWA Office of Civil Rights. Attention to Title VI Program Coordinator, 8th floor, E81105, 1200 New Jersey Avenue, Southeast Washington, D.C. 20590. Thank you. And we can just go through the other ones, Joe. Thank you. And this is the same. We have it in Spanish as well, and we'll pause here for a bit. And moving on to the next one. This is just a reminder on how to use captions and subtitles in Zoom. And if at any point in time during this process, anybody has any technical difficulties, please make sure to use the Q&A feature, and we will be monitoring them to help. Moving on to the next one, Joe. Thank you. Q&A, how to use the Q&A here. Next one. And I will pass it down to my colleague now to continue the presentation. Emily.
Thanks, Sophia. So Anna did a great job in introducing the project, but this is our project team. This is the full project team that's supporting the Active Transportation Plan. As Anna said, the DOT Active Transportation Unit is leading the study, and HDR is supporting. So presenting today will be myself, Emily Baranowski. I am the project manager for HDR for this project, and Mindy Moore, who is our active transportation lead for this project. And of course, you heard from Sophia, who is our public engagement lead. Next slide, please. So first, I just wanted to set the stage for why this work is so important. Active transportation plays a vital role in improving our health, protecting the environment, and really strengthening our economy and enhancing our overall quality of life. It's really about creating safer, healthier, and more connected communities while providing affordable and accessible transportation choices. Connecticut residents deserve transportation systems and public spaces where people of all ages and abilities feel comfortable walking, biking, and rolling safely and confidently. Next slide, please. So the plan has several major components, really all centered around our public and stakeholder input. As somewhat of a separate effort, we are developing a statewide context classification system. This will align with DOT's Complete Streets policy and help make it easier to design roadways that accommodate all users. And for the active transportation plan itself, we first evaluated the existing conditions to better understand the current state of walking and biking across Connecticut. And then building on that, we identified the statewide needs through technical analysis, some regional coordination, stakeholder meetings, and of course, public engagement. So this also included some regional tours where we met directly with each regional planner and municipal leaders to understand their local priorities, challenges, and opportunities. So using all that feedback, we developed a proposed future bicycle network, facility and program recommendations, a sidewalk and bicycle facility prioritization tool, and implementation and funding strategy. So as Anna was saying, we are now in our final phase of the project. We will be refining the recommendations and the final plan materials based on this last round of public and stakeholder feedback. And then we will also develop some monitoring to monitor the plan's success once it's completed. Next slide, please. So this is our overall public engagement schedule. We organized outreach into 3 phases: existing conditions and needs, proposed recommendations, and the final active transportation plan. So throughout each of these phases, we met with the public through surveys, in-person open houses, and virtual meetings, and some community events. And we are currently in that final phase of outreach. So your feedback tonight will really help shape, or today, will really help shape the final recommendations and the materials before the plan is completed late this summer and early fall. Next slide. So our main goal for today's presentation is really to show you all the feedback that has directly shaped the recommendations and tools that will be included in the final plan. So during the first phase of engagement, we really focused on what are the existing conditions and what you all want to see in this plan. And we heard very clearly that improving infrastructure and safety, which includes sidewalks, bike lanes, paved paths, intersections and crossings, and other amenities, is really what will encourage more walking and biking across the state. And then next slide, please. So, and then the second phase, we really focused on what the specific improvements and enhancements could be. And again, we heard how important safety and infrastructure are, but we also heard that infrastructure alone is really not enough, right? Participants emphasized the importance of filling gaps in the network, linking to important destinations. User education and really starting with the youth and safe routes to school are important. Updating the design standards to reflect a lot of the stuff we're working on today, and providing more support for our local and municipal governments and additional resources for all those folks. And then perhaps one of the more important things, we really heard this desire for a change in our community and our culture. People wanting communities that prioritize people that are safe, walkable, and connected and comfortable, rather than the environments that are dominated by vehicular traffic. A lot of people reflected on wanting their children to have the same freedoms that they experience, being able to safely walk and bike to school, to parks, to stores, to friends' homes. And so that really is what we took to heart in our recommendations. So next slide. So to respond to what we heard throughout the engagement process, the final active transportation plan will include really several components that are designed for the public, and then some components that are designed more for DOT and local and regional level to support implementation. So for the public, the main plan will be a concise and easy to navigate document that summarizes the purpose, all the outcomes from our public engagement, the vision, and those next steps. And then another component will be a future bicycle network map, which we are currently developing, and that will kind of be the main part of our presentation today. That will be publicly accessible and available for future planning efforts across the state. And our recommendations for this network map really reflect the many priorities that we heard during our outreach around connectivity, closing network gaps, access to destinations, and really expanding low stress and separated bicycle facilities. So then for DOT, we will be developing a detailed staff user guide, which really covers all the technical analysis that we did for this effort, including funding strategies, implementation steps, performance metrics, and maintenance needs and considerations. And this will really incorporate many of the comments that we heard related to education, enforcement, policy, funding, and implementation. We are also developing a sidewalk and bicycle facility needs or prioritization tool and a bicycle design guide, and this will address the needs for filling in sidewalk gaps, prioritizing safe routes to school, prioritizing first last mile transit connections, and will be a resource that can potentially be used by DOT staff as well as local governments, specifically with those updated design standards. And then, so together, these tools are really intended to help move this plan from vision to implementation and create transparency between DOT, the local governments, and the public. I will now pass it on to Mindy.
Thanks, Emily. So as Emily mentioned, there is a future network map that we're going to be describing. So before we show you that, I want to talk about some of the principles that are underlying the decisions made on that map. So primarily, we look at these 5 active transportation principles when we think about making places better for biking and walking. Safety is always paramount. It is the most important thing that we think about. The network itself needs to be developed in a safe manner, so we're minimizing risk. Next is comfort. So that's it varies from person to person, but basically how comfortable do you feel when you're using that network, if you're on a sidewalk or on a trail or on a bike lane or sharing the space in the street. So that level of comfort might change. We also talk about level of stress. But additionally, there's some extra amenities related to comfort, like is there shade? Is there a place to sit if you're on a long trail route? Is there shelter if you're, caught in the rain or something like that? So there's varying degrees of comfort. Coherence is next, and this is about how easy is it to understand the network. So do you know how to get from point A to point B, how to navigate through a complicated intersection? How connected is this network, and are there gaps in the system? And then we have directness. So this is about how much, if you're biking or if you're walking, can you create a direct route to your destination, or do you have to go out of your way to get there safely? And then we have attractiveness. Especially when we're walking and biking, the scenery around us is important to make that walk or that bike ride enjoyable. So this is more about the aesthetics of the route. How are we celebrating nature and local culture and creating meaning in that space? So the degree of importance of these might vary from trip to trip. If I'm out for a leisurely bike ride, I don't really care if it's direct. I just want to go for a ride. I might care more about how attractive it is. If I'm trying to get to work or I'm trying to get to the store, I'm going to care more about how direct it is, and if it's a safe route. So, and it also might change from person to person. If it's a child that's going to school, certainly you want that to be safe and direct. But like if you're just cruising the neighborhood, walking your dog, that's kind of a different principle needs. So on the next slide, this leads us into our types of bicyclists as well. So I mentioned children versus more experienced cyclists throughout the network. So we do have these different categories of types of bicyclists, and the idea of these types of bicyclists actually originated around 2012, and this idea has been used and tested in various cities across the country over the last 10 plus years. So when we think about our population, we have the non-bicyclists. So about a third of the population probably isn't going to bicycle. They can't. They're not interested in doing that. So and that's fine. We don't expect 100% of the population to want to get on a bicycle. But the largest percentage is typically under this interested but concerned category. So usually over half of the population, of the adult population, would like to bike more, but something is holding them back. So there's some concern that they have. Safety is usually a primary concern, but also not knowing the network very well, or not knowing a bicycle or how to operate the bicycle or maintain the bicycle can also be part of that interested but concerned group. But in our role, we're trying to make a comfortable and connected network so that we can get more of the people in this interested but concerned group to be comfortable going out on their bicycles. Then we have a smaller, somewhat confident group. So these people kind of know more about what's going on with the network. They're pretty comfortable with it, but they're still going to be shy away from them, probably higher volume or higher speed roadways. And then we have the highly confident group. This is typically a very small part of the population. You see them out riding on the highway, and when you're driving by and you think, what on earth are they doing over there? These are the highly confident group, and they'll basically bike wherever they want to go, and they're not too concerned about having the facilities in place. So those types of bicyclists, if we look at the next slide, they lead us into how we create our network. So starting with the traffic tolerant network, that's where our highly confident cyclists are. Some of the network in Connecticut, it's very difficult to have a separated bikeway due to the topography and the right-of-way that's available. So we have this traffic tolerant network where highly confident cyclists might go on longer routes. And then we have a baseline network. And this would be a lower stress network where we can get most cyclists, the somewhat confident and the highly confident together, where we might have a dedicated space for biking, but it might not be fully separated, like with a buffer or something like that. So you might still be somewhat near traffic, and that might not be comfortable for everybody, but it's going to get quite a few people. And then we have our lower stress network. So this is where we're going to get most of that interested but concerned group. This would be a fully separated bikeway, or if it's on a traffic calm street where we have lower volume and lower speed traffic along that street. So this is where we really want to make our connections to destinations like schools and parks, shopping and that sort of thing with this low stress network. So now I'd like on the next slide to show you some imagery of that. So when we're talking about a traffic tolerant network, this is kind of what we're thinking, where we have some dedicated space, some paved shoulders, some shared space for people biking throughout this network. On the next slide, we have our baseline network. So this has integrated some more comfort, some more buffer space between the bike lanes and the traffic. So you can see like the hatched areas creating that buffer. Where we have a standard bike lane, we might be on a lower volume or lower speed roadway. So we're not on a bike lane that's right next to very fast traffic. So this is our baseline network. And the next slide shows our low stress network. And you can kind of see how this is different. We have fully separated facilities. We have our side paths and our trails in this network where people biking and walking are sharing space. And we also have fully separated bikeways. Like you can see in the lower left corner there, that's a two-way separated bike lane. So there's dedicated space for biking, plus additional dedicated space for people walking. We also have intersection and crossing treatments. So on an intersection, we might have a space for pedestrians and a separate space, as you see in the green there, for the bicyclist to cross in a separated bikeway. And then our crossings are very well marked with high visibility crosswalks, crosswalk signage, yield markings. And then like in the top right corner there, we actually have a bit of a raised crosswalk as well. So it acts as a benefit to pedestrians and also traffic calming for the vehicles along that corridor. So this is sort of our low stress network, again, where we're trying to get most users some place where you're comfortable taking your kids along these networks. Now I'm going to pass back to Emily to talk more about the network itself.
Thanks, Mindy. So really to be effective, to have effective bicycle facilities, we want to connect people to the places that they actually want and need to go. So in developing the future network, we looked at a bunch of data sources in terms of destination and demands, but some of the few key ones that we'll highlight today are the activity centers, some schools, transit stations, and bus stops. So this is the activity centers. The Connecticut Office of Policy Management developed this map to show where employment hubs, medical and educational institutions, civic and commercial uses, and cultural attractions and transportation assets cluster at local scales. So they classified activity zones as major, regional, local, suburban, and rural. And so we kind of just use this to understand where both the destinations and demands for biking and walking are. If you go to the next slide. We also looked at bus stops and train stations to start to think about that first and last mile connections. And then the next slide, please. So we also looked at short trip density. So we looked where short trips are already occurring today. So since trips under approximately 2 miles are among those that are most likely to shift to walking and biking when there are safe and comfortable facilities available, we used this data to really understand like where we could convert some of those short vehicular trips to walking and biking. So this data, which is only some of the data that we used, really helped us to identify where stronger bicycle connections could really have the greatest impact and where additional low stress facilities may encourage people to choose active transportation for, you know, the variety of everyday trips that we take. Next slide, please. So now we'll kind of just like walk through how we developed the draft future bicycle network map. And I just want to note that this is really still evolving. We have the draft in capital letters on the top, but we'll continue to refine it based on feedback that we hear from this outreach phase from you all today, from our stakeholder coordination and ongoing discussion with municipal and regional partners. So this is just the beginning, but wanted to kind of explain our process and show you where we're at today. So we began with a base network. This includes all state-owned roadways where bicycling is permitted, which is essentially all the non-limited access state roadways. And I guess I'll also note that because this is a DOT plan, we focused on state roadways because that is where DOT has jurisdiction. So of course, in developing a bicycle network, those local roadways are also a really important component of the network. But this is more to look at state roadways and those regional connections and then to be built upon by those local governments and create those more localized networks. So if you go to the next slide, please. So from there, we layered in the existing and proposed multi-use trail network. A significant amount of work has been done across the state to expand multi-use trails. And these facilities really form the critical backbone for this future network, and particularly for the low stress bicycle network, because these will be off-road separated facilities for the use of both bicycles and pedestrians. So in terms of the colors, we're showing existing, planned, and conceptual. So existing is in green, so those trails are active today and used today. Planned in red and conceptual in purple. Those are pretty similar. What we are considering planned versus conceptual is planned is there has been some planning and some like routing that has been done, whereas purple are really in those conceptual beginning stages, but they're identifying those important connection points that we would like to see. And all of this was compiled from a variety of resources, including DOT, DEEP, the councils of government, and the local bicycle and pedestrian plans. And then we add on our on-road bicycle facilities. And so these are organized into the 3 networks that Mindy described earlier, the low stress, the baseline, and the traffic tolerant. And so each of these network types really serves different users, different comfort levels, different trip purposes. And so together our goal is to create a more flexible and connected statewide system that connects all those activity centers and regionally important destinations. So if we go to the next slide, so we basically took this network and now I'm going to show you that on top of the different destinations data that we use, just so you can start to see how the connections were made. So in many areas, the multi-use trail network really already serves a lot of these key destinations. It's a little hard to see, but you can see how it really does cover a lot of those shorter trip density areas, which are our more urban areas that have those shorter trips. And then if we go to the next slide, so if we start to look at the activity centers and more of the suburban, rural, and local areas, so we prioritize the low stress connections. So those are the trails connections as well as that turquoise e-color. We prioritize those between the major and regional destinations. And then we really focused on destinations that were located within approximately 2 miles of those proposed trails so that you can, the idea is that, the 2-mile trip distance is a comfortable one to have on a bicycle. So if you can connect those major and regional areas to the trail, then you can use the trail system to get around the state, depending on the type of activity that is being done. And then if we go, and then we expanded the future network using the baseline network to really strengthen broader regional connectivity between those major regional and suburban activity centers. And then finally, we considered transit access by ensuring that the traffic tolerant network includes the roadways where transit activity is important, and those transit connections can be made. So overall, the goal of this network is to create a connected system that works for the wide range of users, trip types, and communities across Connecticut. And the hope is that this is, like I said, just the blueprint for regional active transportation, and then can be used to be built on locally and start to implement projects across the state. Pass it back to Mindy.
Thanks, Emily. So you may be wondering, okay, so now how do we make all of this happen? So the active transportation plan does have some implementation steps, and these are some of the steps that we wanted to share with you today. So first is just having a complete street review process. So the idea here is that when the state has a project that needs to happen within a local jurisdiction, then that they're going to coordinate with the regional and local plans for that area to see what they have planned. If they have a local plan to have, added bike lanes or improved crossings or sidewalks, and then work together to develop that in that roadway update. This would also include identifying the maintenance responsibilities between the local jurisdiction versus the DOT, and looking at that level of traffic stress or that level of comfort that we talked about. So how can we make that feel more comfortable for people biking and walking? The design manual updates would relate to things like a standard 11-foot wide travel lane, so that you have more space for paved shoulders or for bike lanes. How do we accommodate biking and walking during construction? So when the road is closed, then how do you get around it as a person biking or walking? Accessible signals. So we want to make sure all of our new traffic signals have an accessible design. And then also having allowance for variation when a state highway serves as a main street for a small town. How can the look and feel and the design of that highway through the small town vary to make it more comfortable for people that are walking and biking within that town? And then this also relates to that bike facility design guide that Emily mentioned earlier that will have more details on how to design those actual facilities. The demonstration project implementation guide. So the DOT already has a demonstration project program. So local jurisdictions can try out new types of facilities and new ideas within their jurisdictions. The implementation guide would take that a little bit further to help provide guidance on materials to use, costs of those materials, and potentially even develop a microgrant program to help local jurisdictions implement those demo projects. And then, of course, Emily also mentioned performance metrics earlier on. So these would be things that some things the state is already tracking, some state things that the state would add on to their tracking metrics. So things like fatal and serious injury crashes related to people biking and walking, the miles of facilities of different types of trails or bike lanes, the funding that's put into these types of facilities, and the participation in various programs that are available. Which leads us to our next slide about funding programs. So where does the money come from? Various places. Of course, the state and the local jurisdiction have their local budgets that they can put towards these projects. There are also several federal programs that can support active transportation. Many of these programs are related to transportation overall, but they allow active transportation as part of those programs. The key one that is directly for active transportation is the Transportation Alternatives Program. So this is used quite a bit for active transportation projects for biking and walking facilities. There's state funding for state roads. A key one here is the Maintenance Resurfacing Program. And so basically whenever a street is repaved, then the DOT can look at it to see is now a good opportunity to add bike lanes or pave shoulders. Are there any other active transportation improvements that need to take place at this time when we're doing other maintenance work? So that is a key program for that. And then there's also state funding for local roads. There's Community Connectivity Grant Program. So this is for targeted infrastructure improvements that the local jurisdiction has in mind, and is a great state funding tool that communities can apply for. And then the Regional Trails Program is offered through DEEP, specifically for trail projects as well. So those are some of the key programs. And now I'm going to pass it back to Sophia to wrap us up.
Thank you, Mindy. All right, everyone. Well, we have almost 28 minutes for Q&A. So this is exciting. This is really what we're here today for. We want to hear from you. We want to get your reactions, like the team mentioned during the presentation. This is kind of like the story they were telling you, right? What happened in phase one, what happened in phase two. And then we want to make sure that what you're seeing today is, resonating with some of you or most of you, ideally. So in order to participate, we're going to be using the Q&A, and we're also going to allow for you to use raise your hand on the screen for those of you who prefer that. But we'll be monitoring both, and so yeah, we have enough time for a few questions today.
So I see a few in the chat. Does anyone want to raise their hand and talk at all, or ask a question, and then we can get to the Q&A chat as well.
We have Julie Pham, who had raised her hand. I will allow Julie to talk.
Hello.
Hello.
Julie. I just want to say I appreciate the whole initiative and everything you all have been doing in terms of, and even like breaking down from and thinking about like from the bicyclists who aren't, like people who aren't interested in bicycling or versus people who are, and like pedestrians and bicyclists. This is my first meeting, but so I feel like I joined a bit late. But I just have a question in terms of plans where if there's any infrastructure happening for just separating bicyclists and pedestrians, just because there are more people that are using e-bikes. So yeah, I was just wondering if that's in the works. Like, for example, I don't know if you saw, but Mayor Mamdani unveiled like design concepts for Park Avenue, and there was like one design where it was mixed in with bicyclists and pedestrians, and another design having like a dedicated bike lane and pedestrians on the side. It was also featured in one of the slides as well, that kind of concept. So I was wondering if there's any implementation for that in the future.
Sure, yeah. So, like you were describing, there are a bunch of different facilities. There's the shared use paths or the multi-use paths and the side paths that are facilities that are off roadway, most of them, or just like separated from the roadway, but allow bicycles and pedestrians to use them. And yes, with e-bikes, especially those speeds can get really high, and that can create a dangerous environment with pedestrians. So there are so bike lanes are for bicycle use only, and those are typically on roadway, so they are a separated facility from vehicles, but they are still within the roadway. Then you have cycle tracks or separated bike lanes. There's lots of different words for these different facilities, but and I believe that's probably what you're talking about, where it is a facility that is separated from the roadway, but it is only for bicycle use. And then there typically is like a sidewalk along the roadway as well that can be used for pedestrians. So all those facilities will be part of that future bicycle network, depending on the conditions, the space available, the feasibility, and then like what network it's proposed to be on and the connections that will be made.
Okay. Cause I reside in Glastonbury and I was on the main street. So obviously was walking on the sidewalk, but so I reached out to my town explaining how I was walking my two dogs and I didn't hear like a kid on an e-bike behind me, and I didn't essentially like had to quickly move my dogs off the sidewalk, but then like the kid just zoomed by, and the proposed solution for me was to like try to educate him some sort of way, but like he's on an e-bike, how am I gonna chase down a kid and say, hey, don't do that again? Or so I was just wondering, like, because it feels like yeah, sure, it happened to me and I'm aware, but what if it happens to someone younger, like or a family, and they're handling kids or babies, and it's just like they don't have that time, or it just feels like a short solution and not really a long-term one, to ensure other people are safe when handling with e-bikers in all age ranges. So I'm not against e-bikes. I like e-bikes and I'm all for it. I just feel like that proposed solution isn't really a good long-term one. So
You mean just education or separated facilities?
education, like chasing down the kid or trying to see if they'll be willing to talk. I'm like, why would they stop after they like just invite me? So yeah.
So I know DOT has some more resources on e-bikes, and honestly, we're in that stage where there's new equipment and bikes coming out all the time with different speeds and different abilities and things like that. So kind of staying up to date with those and the different laws and regulations are important, and educating people on what those rules are and how to safely operate them, and also just being aware of their surroundings, right, is really important for e-bikes, for bicyclists, for drivers, and that is a lot of what we're hearing, and part of that education component.
I'll just chime in too. We're working very closely with our partners in Safe Routes to School program to educate towns and kids around the state on e-bikes and safety. New legislation was passed last October regarding e-bikes. It's a known problem around the state in every community with children on e-bikes, same with adults who are riding irresponsibly. So we do have a really big push through our Safe Routes to School program to get as much information about safety to every community in the state as possible. That's really our biggest approach right now currently with the e-bikes. And as far as separated bike lanes, DOT constantly looks to better design roads. Again, it all has to do with our real estate and how much room we have to build out our network and where we can fit separated bike lanes or protected bike lanes. And we try to do our best, to accommodate everyone when redesigning a road. But thank you for your suggestion and opportunity to answer.
Thank you. And just to do a couple of somebody in the Q&A here, will the CT DOT tools be available for the public to take a look at?
So a lot of the tools developed throughout this plan are primarily for DOT staff, engineers and planners. The tools were created to help really support the staff at DOT to make informed decisions about incorporating bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure into projects. So a lot of that work is really just for internal DOT staff to help them make these decisions and hopefully improve on what we currently have in the state. So a lot of our documents and information that we learned throughout this process will be available on the website for public to view. And that includes the final report and, any other documents that were created. But some of the tools that, specifically have been made for DOT staff to use.
Great. Thank you. Taking another Q&A question here from Aaron Good. Says, sorry, what is the Regional Trails Program? Do you mean the Rec Trails Program?
I believe that is what we're talking about, the Rec Trail Program.
Okay, thank you. And we can take another hand raise here. The next one we have up here is from Sandy Fry. I'm going to allow you to talk. Sandy, if you'd like to unmute.
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
I am unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. I was wondering on the network map, how were the determinations made as to which highway would be no stress, the three categories? How did you come to those decisions as to what you're aspiring for? I'm assuming that's not what they are currently. You're aspiring to that type of facility.
Yeah, it's aspirational. We are showing like the existing trails and then the future and proposed on-road and multi-use trails. So we looked at a variety of different things. We utilized the 2019 Active Transportation Plan that looked at bike suitability and proposed a bicycle route network. So we used that as a base, and then we tried to take it one step further to divide those three different networks. So like I said, we first looked at the regional trails, and those were compiled from a variety of different sources, including DEEP, DOT, COGS, other local and regional planning documents that had those planned and conceptual trails. So that was the beginning. And then we looked at all the variety of destinations and demand and started to basically try and connect those through the low stress network. So using the trails and then using the on-road facilities to connect those together, and then to create those 2-mile connections from those activity centers to the trails. So that was our goal with the low stress network. Then for the baseline network, we tried to create its own network of facilities that connected those more suburban areas to the low stress network to create that next level of network. We really looked at the feasibility. So looking at the the width of the roadway, kind of what the conditions, the traffic and the speed conditions are today, just to understand, like, will those separated facilities be able to be built? And so then we developed it through that. And then we have the traffic tolerant network, which just tried to highlight those additional connections that would like to be made, because of course all the roadways that bike activity are allowed is part of that traffic tolerant network, but really trying to highlight those important connections. And some of those, unfortunately, are just roadways that through environmental constraints or right-of-way constraints, like most likely would not be able to have those separated facilities, but other improvements could be made, like potentially widening shoulders, definitely providing like better pavement conditions for bicyclists, maybe providing better accommodations at intersections just to make it more comfortable for bicyclists.
Yeah, thank you. And going back to some more of the Q&A, Ned Simpson asks, how do your project products relate to municipal and COG POCD?
So, like I was saying, we're focusing on state roads for this project just because that is what DOT has jurisdiction on. We're hoping that then this can be used to grow those local bicycle and pedestrian networks and tie into this statewide network. However, we have been coordinating with the COGS as well as some more of the local staff. We did our regional tours where we toured each region and met with a lot of the different town and city planners to just discuss what their plans are, what their issues are, and things like that, as well as the COGS. We're hoping a lot of these resources and tools that we're developing will make it easier for those local governments to be able to implement and initiate active transportation projects for their local community.
Thank you. And Owen Bussell says, I'm concerned that so much of the state bike network is only for the traffic tolerant, small percentage of the population. Is there a possibility to upgrade those to at least baseline level?
Yeah, I feel the same way. So yeah, we are working to see how much we can expand that baseline network, because that is our goal, is to provide facilities that are more comfortable for more people.
And going back to some of our hand raise, the next up is Patrice Carson. I'm going to allow you to talk. Just unmute.
Hi there. Thank you for taking my question. I actually have two questions. One is, we have a current project on State Route 6 that runs through Bolton, Coventry, Andover, and Columbia, and they are resurfacing, or I believe they're resurfacing the road. And we are trying to see if they would narrow the lane width and add bike lanes on the side of the road through that area. I don't know if this is something, it's hard to see your maps, and I don't know if this is something that's even identified in your plan. That's my first question. And I presume we can do this now, but I think in the future, if it's something that's in the plan, it would have a little more teeth maybe to be able to point to the plan when we request it. My second question is regarding a plan that we had put together, a shared use path plan that ran along Route 44 from Bolton Notch, which there is a connection to the Hop River Trail, which we are grateful to have. It runs through a number of communities, and it's definitely an off-road path, bike and pedestrian path. But this was a shared use path that was supposed to run along Route 44 through Bolton into Coventry. We had a grant ready for it and everything about it, and the public came out in complete opposition to it. They just did not want it along the route. They did not want it in front of people's houses. What do you do in a situation like that if you're going to be recommending these things and the public comes out in that type of manner? Thank you.
Paul, I see you have your hand raised.
Hi, thank you so much for your comment, Patrice. I really appreciate you being involved. The first question about whether we could narrow lanes to add a facility on the side. So there are still engineering minimums, and we're moving towards making those more flexible to get better outcomes depending on the context. And so Emily mentioned the 11-foot lane width as a new standard that was going down from 12 feet to 11 feet. So that's a step in the right direction. Narrow lanes are better for slowing vehicles and gives you more space for other users. And it's still plenty of space for vehicles to travel. So without knowing more context about that location, I think my answer would just be that it's definitely something we're looking at trying to do, and it's automatic through a lot of the repaving processes that are happening. So the maintenance repaving program and the pavement preservation program, they do some hundreds of miles of state roads a year. Those are all moving to the 11-foot lane mile or lane width to provide more space for users. The second question about public coordination, I think that's $1 million question, is what happens there. And I think what you're talking about is evident across the state, where the places that have really well organized public advocacy groups, so like New Haven has the New Haven Coalition for Active Transportation, along with a few other groups, I think they're able to get a lot done because they have a group of people that are willing to show up and say, yes, we want it when it comes time to make the decision. So I think the DOT can do a little bit better of a job of engagement, and we're doing that right now through some new processes. But I think some of it comes down to just community organizing. And I'm not sure there's a really good answer to that, I'm sorry to say.
Thank you.
And that is the unfortunate reality of what we're doing, right? We have our public right of way, and we need to fit so many priorities and users within that right of way. So it's what do you prioritize? How do you do it? How do you do it safely, economically, and all those things? So you do have to look at a lot of different aspects when designing within the public realm.
Great. Thank you both. And going back to some Q&A questions here, we have David Souza, who says, I see info on the plan goals, existing conditions, and public involvement on your website, but why is there no draft version of the report, including recommendations and implementation?
Yeah, so we're still finalizing the draft report. We are here today to get input on some of our recommendations, and we will be making those changes, and we will be providing the draft report and future network map for public comment later this summer or fall.
Ellie King says, can you provide a little more detail about the Complete Streets review step of the implementation steps? I'm part of a bike pedestrian group working to draft a Complete Streets plan for my town, and I'm trying to figure out the right way to connect with these efforts.
I can speak to that a little bit. I'm the bicycle and pedestrian coordinator for the Department of Transportation, so I get pulled into it a lot, where as a project comes along, a couple years ago, I think it was 2023, the commissioner of the Department of Transportation signed the Complete Streets Engineering Design Directive, which all of that is to say that document has an outline of the process and requires that we look at every segment of roadway for all users. So I can provide that document to you. In fact, I'm answering your question in the Q&A. I'm going to put a link in there to the document that has some of the specifics in it. But if you'd like more information about the process, you can reach out to me I'll put my email address, or you can reach out to dot.activetransportationplan, like is on the screen there.
Chris Greenies says, also along the same lines, in general experience in local partnerships, are the regional councils of government a strong partner for this type of infrastructure planning, or do you find that individual town governments are the more enthusiastic partners?
I would say both are very enthusiastic partners and participants. The COGs are part of our statewide, our SATC, our Active Transportation Technical Committee. And so we have been meeting with them throughout the project. They were also the ones who helped us organize our regional tours. So they really took the lead in planning those for us and contacting their local governments to decide what we go and look at. I've also been coordinating with them a lot on this future network map and getting those planned trail network, and they will of course be part of reviewing the on-road network as well. I don't know if DOT has anything else to add. I know DOT in
No,
general
just
works
say
really
that
closely with the COGS.
we work very closely with all the COGS throughout the state, throughout this entire process, and on many other planning documents that we developed. And same goes for them when they develop their active transportation plans or complete streets plans. DOT is involved. We also do work very closely with municipalities around the state. We have good working relationship. We're on different committees and different boards of public work directors and engineers from various towns, like not all of them. So everyone's been involved throughout this entire process, and that includes the Regional Council of Governments and the municipalities that actively wanted to participate.
Sim Atreya says, are there plans to allow bike lanes on Route 6? Also, are there plans to add bike racks in town centers? There seems to be a lack of bike racks everywhere in Connecticut.
Well, I can speak to that. We do have a active transportation microgrant program that allows for the purchase of bike racks. That is a program that we started a few years ago. It kind of goes hand in hand well with our Safe Routes to School program. One of the eligible items for that grant program is purchasing bike racks. Park and rec departments, nonprofits, towns, police departments can apply. We do not pay for the infrastructure, which means the installation of the bike rack, but purchasing the bike racks themselves are eligible under this grant program. And all that information could be found at DOT's website under microgrants.
Does CTDOT have a policy or statement on the misuse of e-bikes on state roads or DEP trails? That is continuing education, clear signage, consequences for abuse. I know we touched on this a little bit earlier as well.
The state legislature passed a law. I think it was last year. It was an update to the e-bike rules, which made the classifications more clear about 1, 2, and 3, where they can be ridden, their maximum speeds, and then who can ride them. So if the motor is too powerful, then it becomes something else. You need a driver's license, which would be sort of an age limit for those sorts of things. And we have a number of, in response to that, and that it's sort of a hot topic, that it is a problem in a lot of places, we've created a help guide to help the public understand and provide education. And then through our Safe Routes to School program, we also do a lot of outreach and education in schools. So we are trying to tackle that, but mainly that's a question in a lot of places. For instance, New Jersey just passed a law that I think it's basically all e-bikes you have to register like a vehicle. So it's totally different. I think the nation is really grappling with that right now.
And DEEP really has jurisdiction over trails. So they would be the ones that would need to be putting up signs and information. We created a info guide that we do share with police departments throughout the state and municipalities. And a lot of those towns are posting that guide or info on e-bikes on their town Facebook pages, trying to get information out to their communities about what's happening with the e-bikes.
Thank you. I noticed that the map of where planned conceptual networks would go were mostly traffic tolerant networks. Would this be a concern due to over half of your sample data stating that they may be more comfortable in a low stress network? Or would these be more prevalent on local roads, trails, as opposed to state roads?
Yeah, so our goal is to provide, an expansive network for those more lower stress facilities, and so that baseline and low stress network. but yeah, the reality is like a lot of these state roads are the higher volume, higher speed roadways. And so it's really, really understanding that balance of users as well as like what is feasible. So that is kind of what our main focus is to create that network, but to create a network that is implementable and can be installed. And then yeah, in terms of a lot of those local roads are more conducive to biking and walking. They are usually lower speed and have lower volume. So that's where that local network kind of comes in to supplement this statewide network.
I would also note that a lot of the state the connections on that map are regional connections. So this would be someone going a long distance in between town centers. And if you're doing that and you're not on a trail, chances are you are a more experienced user. And then there's just so many constraints on a lot of those connecting roads, whether it's topography or like there's a lot of challenges there. Oh, and also a lot of the places where we have the higher tier bike network are in places where there's higher population density. So in terms of the number of users and the number of connections we're making, we're trying to make a balance between all of those different things.
Another one here, in terms of amenities proposed, are bike storage lockers and or secure parking areas part of the plan, especially at commuter lots, train stations, airports, etc.
So newly updated train stations and also ones that are getting redone do provide bike racks, and they do include them now in their plans. We like to stay away from lockers as those tend to be an issue with maintenance. So as far as bike racks, at any of the train stations, they keep getting added as, as maintenance happens and, there's a need for them. So that is currently ongoing with the Department of Public Transportation, is the department, bureau that's responsible for that. But again, the bike lockers, they tend to be more of a, issue than anything. So that's probably something we wouldn't advise to include at different, train stations.
Thank you. Next, will any priority be given to neighborhoods where the housing density is seeing very substantial changes to satisfy the housing shortage? Short trips via active transport could help the new congestion problems, but there are not necessarily any facilities.
Yeah, so like I was showing that short trip density, that kind of shows where a lot of those shorter trips are happening today and might be able to take some vehicles off the roadway and transfer them into bicycle and walking trips to help some of those congestion issues. For that prioritization tool that we're developing, we looked at population, in addition to a bunch of other stuff to help begin to prioritize building those separated facilities in hopes of bringing people out of vehicles and using active transportation instead. So that is why we're focusing on those higher dense areas, because hoping that more people will use those bicycle facilities.
Thank you. Next up, I am concerned about the robustness of bicycle transportation infrastructure on major roadways like Route 1. Some communities, the main state roadways are the only routes to get around town due to very few roads because of the state's largely suburban design roadway network. Will the connections between the low stress network and the large arterials be appropriately designed with protected bike lanes to facilitate transitions between the low stress network to large arterials and then back to the low stress network?
Yeah, so that is a lot of what we have heard are, maybe there is a bicycle facility, but it just ends abruptly, and then you're brought onto the road, and that really can discourage people from using that facility altogether if they can't get from where they need to go to from where they are to go comfortably and safely, then they'll choose a different form of transportation if they can, or, we just don't want people feeling that way. So yes, that is a big goal of the network, is to have it outlined to be able to provide those transitions better, and to provide those more connected facilities, so you don't have a lot of those ending of the various networks.
I want to also point out that that planned future network is really the regional connections. We still have the Complete Streets review process, that implementation step, and that goes on that process is completed for every project. So if there's a state road that's maybe not on the planned future network, but we can see that it makes an important connection between two neighborhoods, that evaluation will still take place, and there's still the possibility for an improvement beyond, even if it's labeled a traffic tolerant, it's connecting to important community connections, or maybe the local network has a gap that can be filled by that project. It can still be addressed. It doesn't limit the process like that. We're still looking for those things.
Does the ATP prioritize routes throughout the state? For example, prioritizing completing routes that are near completion with few segments left to construct versus more difficult to complete routes that are only conceptual and not yet designed?
I think if I'm understanding this question correctly, yeah, part of that planning and design and implementation process is going through those levels. So projects that are in those, design stages are likely prioritized quicker than those that are starting off in the planning stages. Part of that prioritization tool is really looking at those, specifically for sidewalks, is looking at those gaps in the sidewalk network, and prioritizing those as well. If I understood that correctly.
On the map of facilities and stress tolerance, how is stress tolerance assigned? I'm seeing a medium separated highway with speeds of around 60 miles per hour posted 45 miles per hour. This was identified as a traffic tolerant location. The speed differential makes this unsafe.
Yeah, so the type of facility that will be designed will have to take those things into consideration.
Okay, thank you. Next, I hope this ATP will come up with new design standards for at-grade crossings along bike trails and greenways, especially the Farmington Canal Heritage Trail, the HAWK lights and chicane gates we see, for example, on Route 70 in Cheshire are really kind of a disaster. I think we need a new design standard, like using new raised crossings on FCHT in New Haven and Hamden as a model.
We have heard about this crossing multiple times, and I am familiar with it. So I understand your sentiment, appreciate the comment, and yes, we will look into incorporating crossings as part of the bike design guide.
Could there be a policy where appropriate that where there are only room for a sidewalk to be constructed, that the width be increased beyond the 5-foot standard width, maybe up to 8 feet in areas permitting it, so bicycles could have opportunity to pass pedestrians?
We will certainly take your comment and look into the possibility of that.
Okay, thank you. Next, I live in Manchester and would love to bike to work in Hartford. Right now, there are large chunks of the route that are on busy streets and very little to no lanes for bikes. After crossing the bridge to Hartford, the one to downtown Founders Plaza or the one along 291, there are no trails or roadways to get to my location near Jennings Road. Are there any plans to add lanes in these areas?
I can speak to that a little bit, just that all of those roads in Hartford are town roads. So the network there, we wouldn't have jurisdiction over. But on the approach to that, there's a lot of effort at the regional government to connect the Charter Oak Greenway through to those bridges that go across the river into Hartford. And then our work on the active transportation plan at the state level may help. It could help with facilities on some of those state roads that connect into the bridges. But we wouldn't be able to help at all on the Hartford side.
Good, thank you. Why not take minimum laid width to 10 feet? Federal highway allows for 10 feet on arterials.
One of our recommendations I think that we have is to talk about and work with engineering on design manual changes. But a lot of that comes down from the Federal Highways Administration. So I think to get 10 feet on some places, you still have to file a design exception. So we'll just have to work through that.
And Sam Kamen had followed up. Paul, thanks for that. But I think that what you'll find is almost everywhere, everyone is interested in what's happening in their neck of the woods. We all have a hard time engaging in a statewide plan at the state level that doesn't reflect how people could actually use these facilities. Okay. Thank you, Sam. In New Haven, we have been working with the group Bike Streets on their national low stress bike map. And we actually have a draft version that was published. I hope the ATP can build on some of the work that has already been done in this area.
Yeah, Aaron, send it over.
Yeah.
If you have my email, we'd love to. Yeah, please provide.
Or you can, we have the email up on the screen there as well. Next, bike lanes aren't feasible in busy cities and are dangerous. Families with children can't just hop on a bike. Children have to get to school and activities.
There's definitely something to context and choosing the appropriate facility for the location. So I agree, it's not perfect everywhere, definitely.
Next, sharing Connecticut transportation bike laws. Towns can adopt the state 2025 laws specifically or a version. The 2025 update did not include an e-bike mile-per-hour limit. Towns can adopt a mile-per-hour limit, and we have a link here. Thanks for sharing that, Sheila.
So the limit that I mentioned was per classification. So class 1 and class 2 have a maximum assisted speed of 20 miles an hour. But you're right, there's no like speed limit for bicycles, I guess you could say.
Next, previously the study team asked MPOs to comment on the context map. How is this being used within the draft? There were significant concerns about how developed suburban corridors and interchange areas were identified. Additionally, it's not clear how that context map would be utilized and updated.
So you may ask MPOs.
Sure. So we are currently addressing all the comments for the context classification map that we received from the MPOs. And we are also developing a context classification guide, which will help answer a lot of those questions. But in general, once the context classification system is finalized, then there will be a variety of design guidance and documents that will go into detail for a lot of those specifics, and they will, be most likely minimum, so it will not preclude having additional designs for those like complete streets components that are being looked at.
Thank you.
And it will, I just saw the last comment is there's no clarification on when it will be updated. All that will be clarified when we get the final map.
Thank you. And next, we have getting off exit 7 southbound off of 95 is always congested in Stamford. Drivers get blocked in the box. Traffic through Stamford is a nightmare on 95.
Agreed.
Thank you, Susan. That's good feedback. Next, the division of labor between DEP and DOT makes sense when it comes to the overarching purposes of each department, but when it comes to creating an active transport network like this, it seems to create a challenge of jurisdiction over different parts of these active transport corridors. I know this is probably a legislative issue, but is there any thought given to putting projects like this under one umbrella where the ball is always in one department's or entity's court, so to speak?
That's a great suggestion. We do work very closely with our partners at DEEP on various projects, including this one. We do have representatives from DEEP to participate on our groups meetings regarding recommendations for this plan. Unfortunately, we are two different departments and our funding structure is very different. DOT, majority of our funds come from the federal government. Department of Environmental Protection gets funded with state money, so they have a different way of reorganizing their projects and the way they fund what they do throughout the state. We just happen to have a different funding source. We can get a lot more done with the funds that we get from the federal government. But we do coordinate together regularly on all projects, including trails throughout the state.
I would just add that it's even more complicated than that. There's also all the town roads. There's some of the trails are state facilities. Some of the trails are owned by the DOT, but then they have maintenance agreements with the towns. So it is a very complicated network, extremely complicated network. But we are at an hour 15. We're 15 minutes over our projected time. Do we want to make a limit here? Because we've stayed at 5 open questions, I think, for the last 5 or 10 minutes here.
Yeah, we can, type in our answers to these and provide them. If
we could ask one more time if anyone want to raise their hands and ask the question online before we sign off, and then we'll get back to everyone with written comments back on their questions.
We have.
If anyone would like to speak up, raise their hand.
We have Sam raising their hand. Sam, I'm going to allow you to talk.
Hi, folks. Just quickly, I just wanted to get a sense of timeline. I asked this question in the chat, and you responded to it that there will be at some point a version of the map available online that's a little bit more usable for us. And I think, again, based on the questions that you've heard, I think almost everybody's interested in what's happening in their own neck of the woods. The sort of big, massive statewide network is conceptually great, but practically not that important for most people who are using cycling or pedestrian facilities. Do you have a timeline of when we can start to look at a draft version of this that better helps us better understand what's in our neighborhood now in terms of bike and pedestrian facilities and what we should expect coming soon?
Sure, yeah. So yeah, it will be an online interactive map, so you'll be able to zoom in and out in the areas that you are most concerned on, and be able to provide your comments likely this summer.
Great.
Be able to provide
Thanks.
the draft.
Any other questions from folks who want to raise their hands? We're going to end the virtual meeting if there's no other questions.
We have Owen. I'm going to allow you to talk, raising their hand.
Unmute here. Hello, can you hear me? No.
Yep.
Can you hear me? There we go. Hi, this is Clara Biesel. What is the three of us over here? I had a question, which was, there are a few roads in New Haven where we had been asking about, can we get a bike lane on this road? And the explanation was because they're a state road, it has to go through the state. And I was wondering, who are you all the people to contact with suggestions of what roads might benefit from bike lanes? Who would we contact about that if the roads themselves are state roads?
So we do have a process in place. Typically, the local traffic authority from each of the municipalities is the direct contact with them for DOT from each town. So I suggest you get in touch with the local traffic authorities for your town. That could be for New Haven. All that information could be found on DOT's website. That could either be the chief of police or the traffic person from the police department. But they are the ones that have to contact the DOT and our traffic division at DOT.
Okay.
But again, the person and their information could be found on DOT's website, local traffic authority.
Thank you so much.
And also, you're not alone in being confused by that process. That is something we heard over and over again through our outreach through this process. Is people don't know how the system works, and it is complicated. So that's something we're hoping to simplify through some of the recommendations we make through the plan. All right, should we wrap up and then we'll just answer these questions via text?
Yep.
Yes, thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. We appreciate all of you and all your questions. I hope this was a informative session for everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.